Hey there, this is Alexis Knight. You ever scroll through your feed, see a headline, and think, that can't be real? Or maybe you completely freak out. How about this? A girl in a wheelchair who could walk. A mother murdered by the daughter she raised. A family channel turned into a crime scene. A parenting guru who lands in prison for starving her own children. Welcome to the circus. I'm Alexis Knight, your backstage pass to this freak show. This isn't true crime the way they package it on streaming. This is true crime in real time. This is about what people believe, even when the facts say otherwise. It's about how the court of public opinion, not the legal system, decides who walks free and who gets crucified. Today, here in this episode, I'm going to start with Gypsy Rose Blanchard. I know you know her. Most of you should know her. But what you know is old, okay? She didn't just get out of prison. This woman got famous. Book deal, TV deals, influencer level attention. And the second she touched daylight, she became something most ex-cons don't. She became a brand. Was she a victim? Absolutely. But what's she doing with her freedom? Because it's not quiet. It's not private. It's curated. It's calculated. And oh boy, is it monetized. And it's raising questions people don't want to ask. Can you cash in on trauma? Do you deserve a platform just because people feel bad for you? And what happens when your pain becomes profitable? That is going to be part one, okay? The after of Gypsy Rose, all right? And then we're going to head to Ruby Franke. You probably know her. Well, if you're a mom and you were involved, some of you may not understand this story or know about it. She's the YouTube mom who made a living telling people how to parent while her own kids were duct taped and starving. She pled guilty. She's locked up. But the story doesn't end there. Just like Gypsy Rose, this woman still has followers. She is still manipulating from the inside. And now we're finally seeing the fallout. Not just for her family, but for the entire influencer industry built on exploiting children. This is not about closure. This is about exposure. So grab your coffee, guys, or your cocktail, because here we're not just watching the fire, we are naming who lit the match. Let's get into it. All right, let's start with Gypsy Rose. I know that most of you, probably know the stories behind Gypsy Rose Blanchard and Ruby Franke. But know this, there's more to the story here, more to discuss. But if you missed Gypsy Rose or you want a refresher, maybe you're a little rusty on what happened here, let me give some background. Because, this young girl, she looked like a porcelain doll. She had big eyes, a very sweet smile, soft voice. She wore tiaras as a girl, Disney shirts, lots of wigs. Her mother, known as Dee Blanchard, pushed her around in a wheelchair and told anyone who would listen her daughter was dying. Leukemia, muscular dystrophy, seizures, vision problems, lots of things. The list was endless, and it was terrifying. It was endless, yet somehow believable. Gypsy Rose did not go to school. She didn't have any friends. She didn't question why her teeth were rotting or why her body didn't match the age on her birth certificate. Because Dee had a script, and Gypsy was locked in it, playing the role of a dying child on command. The story was airtight, and everyone bought it. The doctors, the neighbors, the charities, even Habitat for Humanity, who built them a free pink house in Missouri. But behind that front door, things weren't just strange, they were straight up criminal. Gypsy Rose was never sick, not once. Dee shaved her head to make her look like a chemo patient, faked her medical records, dragged her to hospital after hospital, convincing doctors to perform unnecessary procedures. And it worked. We're talking feeding tubes, medications, surgeries, all for conditions that Gypsy did not have. Wow. This was not overprotective parenting. This was Munchausen by proxy, cranked up to a psychotic degree. And Dee Dee, she didn't stop there. She told Gypsy she was mentally challenged, told her she had the mind of a 7-year-old, and she isolated her, controlled her food, her internet, her thoughts. She kept her legally incompetent, so even if Gypsy wanted to escape, she'd have nowhere to go, no way to prove a thing. Dee Dee held the birth certificate hostage, changed the story constantly, said Gypsy was born in 1995, then it would be 1993 or 1991. Every lie, just another chain. But Gypsy was not stupid. She was not broken. And somewhere inside, behind all the trauma and manipulation, she was still alive and she wanted out. And like most teenagers locked in a nightmare, she found her escape, where so many others do, online. Enter Nicholas Godejohn. She met him on a Christian dating site, and the connection was instant. But it wasn't all prayers and purity rings. Nick had dark fantasies. He called himself a vampire, talked about BDSM, claimed he had multiple personalities, including one named Victor, who was violent, aggressive, and dominant. And Gypsy, she leaned in. After all those years of being told she was weak, stupid, and helpless, suddenly someone wanted her and listened to her and saw her as powerful. It was intoxicating, as you can imagine. I mean, they started plotting, though. That's when this all starts. Secret online messages turned into phone calls, then into sexual role play, and then into a plan. Kill Dee Dee. The only way out, Gypsy believed, was blood, so she gave Nick permission to do it. Told him exactly when and how, and in June of 2015, he showed up. Not to rescue her, not to sneak her out, but to murder her mother. He walked into their home with gloves, a knife, and zero hesitation, and Gypsy waited in the bathroom with her hands over her ears while Nick stabbed Dee Dee 17 times in the back. She died in her bed, surrounded by Disney toys and prescription bottles. Her final moments were silent. No witnesses, no help, no resistance. Because Dee Dee was sleeping and her own daughter had handed her to a killer. Then Gypsy packed a bag, grabbed some cash, and fled with Nick. They mailed the murder weapon to his house, took a Greyhound bus like it was a vacation, and just days later the internet exploded. Because Gypsy didn't disappear quietly. She posted on Facebook from Dee Dee's account the status update that blew the lid off this entire story. It read, "That bitch is dead." It shocked the town. Everyone thought Gypsy was missing, maybe kidnapped, maybe dead too. But she wasn't. She was at Nick's house in Wisconsin, eating brownies and watching movies. When police knocked on the door, she opened it with no hesitation. She was standing and walking and smiling, fully healthy. The cops couldn't really understand what they were looking at. The girl in front of them was not sick, was not disabled. She was 23 years old and had just orchestrated her own mother's murder. And the question that followed was one no one could answer very easily. Was she a victim, or was she a killer? The public did not know what to do with it, and for years people had donated money, built her a home, cried over her story, and now they were learning it all was a lie, and a bloody one at that. But it wasn't so simple. Dee Dee was a manipulator, a master liar, a woman who mutilated her own daughter to keep the gifts coming. Gypsy wasn't just tricked, she was tortured. But still, she planned a murder, and she did not run. She didn't call the cops either. She weaponized her boyfriend and let him do the dirty work, and then she posted about it on Facebook like it was a joke. The prosecution had a mess on their hands. I mean, how do you sentence someone who's both abused and complicit? Well, enter the Menendez brothers. Check that episode out from yesterday, guys. Things are going on there. But anyway, back to this. Gypsy was charged with second-degree murder. But instead of going to trial, she took a plea deal, 10 years in prison. Now, Nick was not so lucky. His case went to court, and he was convicted of first-degree murder, life in prison, no parole. So that's it for Nick. I mean, that was short-lived. The media circus was immediate. HBO ran a documentary, Mommy Dead and Dearest. Then came the dramatization, The Act, on Hulu, with Joey King as Gypsy and Patricia Arquette as Dee Dee. Suddenly, everyone had an opinion. I mean, was she justified? Was it self-defense? Was she just a broken kid doing the only thing she could? But through all the noise, Gypsy stayed quiet. For years, she sat behind bars and said almost nothing. Until recently. Now she's out. She was released from prison in December of 23, early after serving 8 years, and instead of hiding from the spotlight, well, she walked right into it. Hair done, makeup done, brand new nose, Instagram ready. She was married, giving interviews, talking documentaries, planning a book. Some say, hey, this woman's cashing in on murder, while others started saying, hey, she's finally living the life her mother stole from her. Either way, one thing is for sure, Gypsy Rose Blanchard is not the same girl who went to prison. She went in a sad victim of circumstance, and she walked out a star. She walked out like it was a press event. Her hair was curled, her outfit styled, makeup flawless. This was not a quiet re-entry, and this was on purpose. This was a rebrand. In less than 24 hours, she went from inmate to influencer. It was that fast. Instagram hit 7 million followers. Can you believe that? 24 hours, guys. TMZ ran back-to-back stories. I mean, people couldn't look away. The girl they once pitied, then judged, and then forgot, well, she was now front and center, and not for a crime, not for a court date. We're talking a glow-up. I mean, what a shift. She marries Ryan Anderson while still behind bars. A fan turned pen pal turned husband. The media called it prison romance. But it was more like a strategy, okay? He gave her stability, gave her a normal life waiting on the outside, a place to land. But once the cameras turned on, the cracks showed. Because Gypsy wasn't just catching up, she was catching everything. Photo shoots, reality show contracts, public appearances, paparazzi. I mean, she did Dr. Phil, then opened a TikTok, talked trauma, talked survival, talked nose jobs and lashes, and even diet tips. She wanted a new name, like a new life, a new face. But what about remorse? I mean, the question hit hard and fast. Critics said she was profiting off her mother's death, not just surviving. She was selling tragedy. And when she smiled on red carpets or posted thirst traps, people started to flip. Sympathy turned into suspicion. I mean, was she a victim or was she a manipulator? Again, people are asking. Now, meanwhile, Nicholas, he's still in prison. Life without parole, he's not very happy. He started giving interviews also. He's calling Gypsy a liar, a user, a puppet master. Did you see any of those? He claimed she seduced him, controlled him, and begged him to kill Dee Dee. He said he was autistic and unstable and in love, and she exploited all of it. Of course, Gypsy denied it all and said Nick was just dangerous. Said he was never supposed to actually show up or really supposed to kill her mother. It was just to scare her mother. But that doesn't hold up. The texts tell a different story. So we know she lied. She handed him the knife, bought him his bus ticket, and opened the door. But the media loved her Because Gypsy was a walking contradiction. Something people could be interested in. And what am I talking about? You always know it, guys. Dollars and clicks. Gypsy was soft-spoken and savvy, kind of childlike, but calculating. Every interview was a total performance. Every soundbite was a brand play. She became a mirror for whatever people wanted to see. Survivor, manipulator, tragic icon, tabloid queen. And then she dropped the bomb. She wants a baby. That was shocking. She told the cameras she was ready to start a family. After all of the prison and surviving and all of this, she wanted a daughter, and she wanted to name her Mia. Well, people were stunned. The girl who is medically imprisoned by her own mother wants to raise a child. Headlines were exploding. Some called it redemption. Others called it reckless. Psychologists, of course, weighed in. She needs time. This girl needs therapy. She needs to process the trauma before she can become a mother. But Gypsy, well, she didn't care. She had done the time, 8 years. She was free. And in her mind, she'd already lived a lifetime in a prison. First under DD and then behind bars. So now, this girl was done waiting. But not everything went her way, okay? In early 24, Gypsy and Ryan split, and it wasn't clean and it wasn't quiet. Maybe you still missed it or some of it. There were rumors of control issues, emotional volatility, Gypsy texting an ex, and that ex? Ken Urker, her previous fiancé. Well, suddenly he's back. He's posting selfies because, now he's online. They're holding hands. They're whispering about new beginnings. The tabloid cycle kicked right back into gear. And that's good for everyone involved, isn't it? People start asking questions again. I mean, was this real? Was it scripted? Is it love? Is it just another act? Is it just another way to stay relevant? Because one thing Gypsy knew how to do was to stay in the spotlight, right? And that spotlight burned brighter than ever. Hulu renewed the act. She started filming her own documentary, Gypsy Rose: Life After Lockup. Every single thing, every move was monetized. Every outfit, every quote, every single tear. She was turning her trauma into content, whether the world was ready for it or not. But here's the question that still haunts this case. Can you be both a villain and a victim? Because Gypsy Rose absolutely was abused. There is no question about this. Dee Dee robbed her of her body, her freedom, her identity, and all of that is fact. But Gypsy also planned a murder. I mean, that's fact too, and now she's famous for both. America loves redemption stories. We know this. But it also loves to tear people down. Okay, it's not a fun space. America can be tough, especially on women. Especially women who don't stay small and stay in the background. So the cycle is playing out in real time. One week, Gypsy's a phoenix. The next, she's a fraud. And through it all, she's standing there posting and smiling and selling, definitely surviving. But there's a darkness under it, a weight. Because no matter how much she transforms, the facts will never change. Her mother is dead, stabbed to death while she hid in the bathroom. It's not a metaphor. That is real fact, truth, okay? And Nick, he's not posing for magazines. He is not doing brand deals. He's rotting in a cell, likely forever. And that doesn't excuse what he did, but it does make the scales harder to balance. Gypsy says she wants peace. She wants a quiet life, a family. But peace doesn't come from fame, and it doesn't come from filters. It comes from reckoning. And that's the part no one can do for her. So as she steps further into the spotlight, the public will keep watching and cheering and judging and dissecting. She'll keep making money off of all of it. Okay, because the truth is, Gypsy's role isn't just a person anymore. She's now become a symbol. A fairy tale gone wrong. A cautionary tale with some glitter on top. And in the court of public opinion, that's all of us guys, the trial is still going. And that's where I'm going to leave it on Gypsy Rose Blanchard today. Not as a story wrapped in justice or clarity, that's for sure, but as an echo still bouncing around every courtroom of the mind. Because this case did not end with a conviction. It ended with a transformation. And now the world is watching a survivor turned celebrity try to convince us that what came out of a prison cell can pass for freedom. But let's be clear, this is not over. Not in real life, not in the headlines, definitely not here. Because on true crime and the court of public opinion, we don't wait for verdicts. We pull the curtain back and let the audience decide. That's you. Okay, let's move on to Ruby Franke. Another name I'm sure that you know or have heard of. But there's more going on here. This story isn't over either. Now, if you missed it, she was a mother and an influencer, and everyone took it all in. But this was an interesting transformation. Was it a surprise, or was it just a surprise to us? Not quite sure. Who was Ruby Franke? Because her image was definitely clean. She was a Mormon and a mom, and she was online. But let's get into some history here so we can understand what actually happened. Because before the mugshot, before all the child abuse charges, before the broken house of horrors that really did shock the nation, Ruby Franke was Mormon, and she was Mormon mom royalty. She built her image with surgical precision. She had 6 kids, 1 husband, a big smile, and a spotless house. She was the kind of mom who meal prepped, enforced curfews, and looked camera ready by 7 a.m. I mean, she was firm but faithful, organized, disciplined, a devout member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, who believed parenting wasn't just a responsibility, it was a divine assignment, and the world believed her. From the outside, she seemed like everything American motherhood was supposed to be. And that was the point of the whole thing. Ruby wasn't just living a life, she was selling one. Carefully filtered, edited, packaged for mass consumption. The Utah accent, the calm tone, the modest clothing. Every video was like a promotional reel for her perfection. But underneath that calm exterior was the seed of something colder. Control masked as order. Discipline weaponized as virtue. A need to dominate children, disguised as good values. When Ruby launched her YouTube channel, 8 Passengers, it was 2015, and she wasn't looking to be famous, she wanted to be right. She was tired of what she called lazy parenting trends. The gentle parenting, the permissiveness, the emotional validation. She had no patience for any of that, and to her, children needed structure and rules and obedience. And that wasn't just her opinion, that was her religion, her identity, and soon it was her brand, and YouTube ate it up. Her videos featured early wake-ups and chore charts, homemade lunches, they had prayer time, strict house rules. But unlike some family vloggers who focused on the fun and the chaos of big families, her tone was clipped. Her expectations were high. There was no playfulness, no softness, just enforcement. And it wasn't long before her approach drew attention. Parents across America, particularly in conservative and religious communities, they gravitated toward her like she was a prophet. She validated everything they believed, that children today were entitled, that tough love was biblical, and that good moms do not bend, they enforce, period. Ruby became a mirror for millions of women who felt exhausted and unseen or overwhelmed. And her content told them, you are not too harsh. You're just doing what needs to be done. And that was dangerous. Because with every view, every subscriber, every comment praising her as a model mother, Ruby's confidence was growing, and so did her control. Because soon, she wasn't just parenting on camera, she was punishing on camera. And not just punishments, we're talking public shaming. She'd film herself confronting her own kids. She would lecture them. She would mock them, question their honesty, deny them food, take away their comfort items. And she put it all online. And to her, this was discipline. To her followers, it was structure. But to trained professionals watching in the background, this was emotional abuse happening in plain sight. But still, Ruby did not stop. In fact, she doubled down. When critics emerged, she brushed them off as soft or worldly or misguided. She insisted her kids would grow up strong because of her rules and that they would thank her one day. She stood behind her decisions even as her kids began to visibly flinch and emotionally retreat and withdraw into themselves, again all on camera. There was no space for rebellion in Ruby's world, and definitely no room for vulnerability. But here's the thing. Ruby Franke didn't create this image out of nowhere. She came from a community that actually rewarded it. In the Mormon culture where she comes from, the nuclear family is sacred. The home is the domain of the mother. Order is not optional, it is ordained. And while plenty of LDS mothers parent with love and flexibility, Ruby's interpretation was rigid, almost like military. Her faith reinforced her authority, and her followers, many of them Latter-day Saints, reinforced her righteousness. This wasn't just a parenting style, this was a theology of control. She believed it was her spiritual responsibility to mold her children, to break their will if she needed to. She wasn't teaching them to be independent, she was teaching them to obey. And over time, the line between obedience and submission began to blur. That's when the family fractures began. Viewers started noticing something was off. The older kids looked hollow-eyed. The younger ones seemed scared to speak freely. And Ruby, she became more and more defensive. She began pulling back from traditional family vlogging and leaning harder into the so-called truth-telling, and eventually she stopped featuring some of her children altogether. But the public didn't walk away from this, and these changes, instead, they kind of leaned in. There's a deep sickness in how we consume suffering. That's what I'm pointing out here, especially when it's wrapped in the disguise of normalcy. Ruby's channel became a live broadcast of a slow burn trauma, and people watched over and over again, even with praise at times, some with suspicion, some with morbid fascination. No matter what it was, Ruby was allowed to just keep going. Her husband, Kevin, began to fade from the picture quietly and subtly. He was once a co-star and smiling and supportive and involved. But as Ruby's ideology grew more intense, Kevin started pulling away and eventually just moved out, and their marriage collapsed off screen. This was a very big manipulation of Ruby, who told him it was for the benefit of their marriage for him to leave her and stay away from the children. That is how much hold she had on all of this. And she didn't stop. Instead, she finds someone new, a woman who validates everything she believes, a so-called therapist with a fixation on obedience and sin. Enter Jody Hildebrandt, a name you've also probably heard, and the stage was now set. The clean image was still intact for anyone who wasn't looking too hard, but behind the scenes, Ruby Franke was no longer just a strict mom. She was now radical, and soon she would become a criminal. But let's pause here before we get to the crimes, because this section is about the image, the curated perfection, the godliness, the maternal authority that gave her a stage and a following. Because the truth is, Ruby Franke built a career not in spite of her cruelty. She built it because of it, and it worked. She spoke to a cultural wound. Parents who felt ignored, overwhelmed, desperate. and she gave them permission to tighten that grip, and the internet gave her the microphone. Her followers didn't want nuance. They wanted certainty. They didn't want parenting advice. They wanted permission to also be harsh, and Ruby delivered it over and over again. I wonder how that rippled out into the world. It kept going until one day a child escaped. But before that window, before that duct tape, before that call to 911, Ruby Franke was still a mom. She was still sipping smoothies, still telling the world that her home was filled with love and that her methods were God's work. She was never questioned, never stopped, and never held accountable because she looked like the deal. And she sure did. And that's what makes her one of the most terrifying mothers on the internet. The internet helped produce this facade. And it's not just happening with Ruby Franke. She is shut down, as she was. But there are others still out there going every single day. And as I move on here, how much has Ruby really been silenced? And because Ruby Franke did not disappear when she went to prison. All that silence, if you watch the videos of when she was arrested and in the interrogation room, this woman does not speak and does not express a thing. But then she gets to prison and she transforms. So with, Gypsy Rose, she comes out and becomes something different. And now we have Ruby Franke going in and becoming something different. She's transforming, and not really in the way most people would hope, okay? There was no breakdown, no sobbing apology, no reckoning with the damage. Oh no. Ruby Franke walked into that cell with the same controlled posture, the same tight-lipped certainty, and the same chilling belief that she was still right. The Utah State Correctional Facility, where she is serving her sentence, is a far cry from the spotless home she once curated for YouTube. But Ruby adapts quickly. She's not loud. She's not falling apart. She's organizing. According to multiple sources from the inside, Ruby has settled into a routine that mimics her old life as much as possible. She wakes up early, structured days, and above all, a lot of writing. Yes, Ruby has become a prolific letter writer and journal keeper. She fills notebook after notebook with scripture and reflections and what some suspect is the early formation of a book. Most certainly, right? Her letters to select contacts outside the prison are not just personal either. They're ideological. She doesn't speak about her crimes in terms of regret. She reframes them as persecution. She refers to her own incarceration as a trial of the faithful, a phrase lifted straight from the kind of religious literature that shaped her worldview. This isn't humility. It's branding again. Kind of the opposite of Gypsy, right? Only she's doing it on the inside. Because she's doing it on the inside. Ruby Franke is building her comeback story from behind bars, and it starts with making herself the martyr. Former friends and family members say she's already positioned herself as chosen in conversations, someone who was misunderstood, attacked, but now refined through suffering. And in a deeply religious ecosystem, that narrative isn't just delusional, it is dangerous because it can work. One of the most disturbing developments is her continued loyalty to her co-defendant, Jody Hildebrandt, the so-called therapist who helped radicalize Ruby under the banner of spiritual truth, remains a presence in her life even now. Though they're not housed together, sources say Ruby continues to reference Jody's teachings in her own writings and conversations. She's not backing away from the ideology that landed her in prison. Instead, she is reinforcing it. Her writings reportedly use the same connections from Jody That language, talk of distortion, truth, sin, and accountability, that framed her abuse of her own children as righteous parenting. To Ruby, the beatings and the starvation, the isolation, they were not acts of cruelty. They were, and still are, acts of moral correction. And while prison has taken her platform, it has not taken her desire to preach. There are very strong rumors, supported by insider sources and interviews, that Ruby intends to write a memoir once she is released. The framing is predictable. A faithful mother betrayed by the world, persecuted for her beliefs, now walking the path of redemption. And I mean, let's be honest, if she puts it out, people are going to buy it. Because we live in a culture that rewards good redemption arc, even when the person never changed. Because they're giving us something. Hey, it happened. They went through the process. Who cares how they are? La, la, la. There are also whispers that she's trying to convert others inside. Not loudly. Not a, join my cult kind of thing. But in a subtle and calculated way. Using conversation. Talking about motherhood and discipline. And about truth and distortion. If you have followed her for years, and many of you are out there, you know this is classic Ruby, slowly laying groundwork. Not really for connection, it's for control. She's laying the base. And meanwhile, she's on a strict monitored list. Her communications are screened, her visitors limited. But that doesn't stop the manipulation. People have already reported that she's trying to maintain influence over certain family members through carefully worded letters, where, she avoids direct confession, but leans heavily into guilt and spiritual obligation. She has not apologized to her children. Not really. Not publicly. And according to those close to the case, not privately either. What she's offered instead are justifications, that what she did was hard but necessary, that the world does not understand tough love, that her kids needed to be broken to be saved. This mindset is still active, it is still functioning, and it is still influencing, and that's what makes her dangerous to this day. In prison, Ruby Franke does not need a YouTube channel to lead. She just needs an audience. A listener. Any vulnerable woman who doesn't feel seen. Maybe it's a correctional officer with conservative leanings, or maybe a reporter eager for a headline. I mean, she knows how to plant seeds, and this girl's got nothing but time. What few understand is how fully Ruby believes in her own story. She does not see herself as a fraud. That is not what happened here. She sees herself as a warrior. She is truly in her own delusion. Warriors don't regret battle. They just prepare for the next one. She's reportedly seeking approval to participate in certain programs that align with religious reentry or personal development, and not because she wants to change. We know this. It is because it looks good on paper. She needs to plan her exit. She is not stupid. She understands how parole boards work, and she's playing the long game. She's also monitoring through secondhand channels what is being said about her outside. She knows that documentaries are coming. She is aware of the headlines. And this girl is planning her life back on the outside. Now, if Ruby Franke does get out of prison early, and she might, the impact will be felt far beyond her own household. That is for sure. She will walk out not just as a woman who served her time, but a symbol. Again, a symbol. A cautionary tale for some, and a potential martyr for others. And she is well aware of that. And that's what makes her return so dangerous. She's serving only 4 to 15 years, guys. Okay, if she gets out on the shorter end, we're not talking about some 70-year-old relic. We're talking about a woman still in her prime, still sharp, still with a built-in audience of followers who once believed that she was the gold standard of motherhood. She'll have lived through the scandal, court, and incarceration. And if she leans into redemption, The platforms will open their doors. Publishers will listen. Podcasts will reach out, and documentaries are going to line up. She's already setting the stage from her cell. She's writing, remember? She's working on the narrative. If she comes out early, she will hit the ground running, and not in shame. This time, for her, it's going to be in strategy. She'll frame herself as misunderstood and over-prosecuted, and of course, restored by God. And for every person who sees a criminal, there will be someone else who sees a warrior, a survivor of cancel culture, a woman who stood for truth and paid the price, a hero. This is not speculation, guys. This is pattern. You can watch it play out for yourselves because it will. We have seen the script before. Now let's shift the lens to where it matters most. Her own children. They aren't just rebuilding. They're healing from trauma that was packaged as parenting. They were starved and tied up, emotionally shattered and gaslit. Some of them will struggle to speak openly. Others, like Cherie, have become advocates out of necessity. But this isn't a story that ends when the judge bangs that gavel, okay? This is lifelong damage. And the mother who inflicted it isn't even remorseful. In fact, she's just preparing to come back. If Ruby walks free early, imagine what that means for the children. The woman who called her abuse consequence will be back in public view, maybe even trying to make contact, maybe pushing for influence, even from a distance. Her voice has weight. Her words can trigger. Her presence on screen, if allowed, will be more than a public appearance. It will be a psychological weapon. And then what about the rest of the public? I mean, let's be honest. Part of the reason Ruby was able to get away with this for so long is because the internet just sat there and applauded it. Millions watched and clicked. All that jazz, they promoted it. They amplified it. So when Ruby gets out, she's not returning for a neutral life or to a neutral environment. She is returning to a machine that already fed her once, and she's been working. Maybe it can happen again. And what about the system? Well, right now, child labor laws do not cover family vloggers. We are so behind, guys. Pretty much in every episode I talk about, we'll notice how we are behind, right? I mean, abuse reporting is too slow. Online parenting advice is often unvetted and unchallenged. If Ruby re-enters the public sphere, she won't just be a former prisoner. She's going to be a test case for whether the system has learned a thing, for whether we as viewers have learned a thing. If we let her rebrand, if we let her profit, if we give her that second act, we're saying abuse is forgivable. If it's well edited and framed as faith, it's just okay. This isn't about vengeance, it's about memory. Ruby Franke's name should never again appear without the words convicted abuser. It shouldn't say author or influencer, certainly not speaker or redeemed. Because if she walks out of prison and into a book deal or a podcast chair or a platformed pulpit, then her kids won't be the only ones failed. We all will be. Ruby Franke built a brand on control and called it motherhood. She weaponized discipline, monetized pain, and preached it like a gospel. And now, from inside prison walls, she is still working the angles, still working, still planning. Her kids are left with trauma. The internet's left with guilt, and the system is just wide open to this day. If we let her rewrite this story, we're not just enabling a comeback. We are proving she was right to begin with. And in this court, we don't let that slide. This has been a case about more than just criminal charges. It's about manipulation wrapped in morality and a culture that turned a blind eye until it was too late. Look, we started out today with Gypsy Rose Blanchard, A young woman who was manipulated, abused, and then criminalized for breaking free. We ended up with Ruby Franke, a mother who did the manipulating and carried out the abuse and is already laying groundwork for her return. Two completely different stories, one common thread: control masquerading as care and the public's role in deciding who gets sympathy and who gets silence. This has been True Crime and the Court of Public Opinion. I am Alexis Knight. Stay sharp, ask the difficult questions, and always demand the truth. Until next time.